The Trathi fleet appeared without warning, their ships immense and dark, like shadows that blocked out the sun as they descended into Earth's orbit. The world watched in stunned silence as the sky was overtaken by the sight of ships that looked as though they had been built to ravage entire worlds, a fleet so vast that no human eyes had ever seen anything like it before. Their dark metallic surfaces shimmered as they hovered above the planet's cities. Below went into chaos as alarms blared across the world's capitals. The first signals from Earth's military were clear. The enemy was beyond their reach. The technology aboard these ships was unlike anything Earth had ever encountered. This was no simple attack, no random raid. This was the arrival of something much worse. This was the arrival of an ancient alien empire that had conquered countless civilizations across the stars. And now it was Earth's turn. The fleet was only the beginning. Soon came the first message from the invaders, broadcasted across every television screen on the planet. A single sentence repeated over and over, with cold mechanical precision. "We are the Xtrathi. Surrender now or face destruction." The message echoed in the hearts of all who heard it as a sense of dread gripped the nations of Earth. Humanity had never known true defeat, but now they were staring it in the face. What could they do against such an overwhelming force? There was no time to hesitate, no time to ponder the past. The world leaders gathered in a global summit held in the heart of New York City, their faces grim but determined, as they knew they had to make decisions that would shape the future of their people. It was during this gathering that Sarah Hayes, a scientist and strategist who had dedicated her life to studying human potential, stood before the council and spoke the words that would ignite the spark of defiance in all of humanity. "We are not like the others," she said. "Our greatest strength lies in what the Xtrathi fail to understand. They think we are weak because they see no value in the things we take for granted. But we are more than what they see. We are resourceful. We are resilient. We are adaptable." She paused as the room fell into silence. "And if we stand together, we will not fall," she continued. The leaders were not convinced at first. The Xtrathi's power was undeniable. Their ships were impervious to most conventional weapons. Their soldiers were said to be stronger, faster, and more ruthless than anything humanity had ever faced. Yet, despite the odds, the idea that humans were not entirely powerless began to take root in the minds of Earth's leaders. They would not give in without a fight. They would search for ways to defend their planet. They would fight to the very end, no matter the cost. And so the first moves in the battle for Earth were set into motion. The clock was ticking as humanity's brightest minds scrambled to develop strategies, technologies, and weapons to fight back in the face of what seemed like inevitable destruction. But even as the enemy loomed over them, the humans began to realize one undeniable truth. The Xtrathi had made a grave mistake. They had underestimated the children of Earth. As the Xtrathi fleet hovered above Earth's major cities with their intimidating presence, something unexpected began to stir within humanity, a collective spark of resistance that spread across the globe faster than anyone could have predicted. The first few days were filled with chaos, but the moment that fear began to settle was when humans realized their most dangerous weapon was not in the hands of their military or their governments. It was in the hearts and minds of their people. Nations that had once been divided by politics and ideologies suddenly found common ground in the face of an overwhelming threat. Earth's greatest minds from every corner of the world gathered together, not as individuals of separate countries, but as citizens of the same planet. They understood that their survival depended on cooperation not only among nations, but across every walk of life. Sarah Hayes stood at the forefront of this movement as she spearheaded the effort to reverse engineer alien technology obtained from prior encounters with alien ships scattered across Earth's surface. The research teams worked tirelessly day and night, feverishly analyzing alien materials, studying the advanced weaponry, and attempting to adapt it to human use, while global leaders made speeches declaring that Earth would fight back with everything they had. The real revolution was happening behind closed doors in secret laboratories far away from the eyes of the invaders, and in the minds of those who believed that humanity's true strength lay not in numbers, but in ingenuity. As the days passed, and the Xtrathi made no move to attack yet, Earth's defenses began to take shape. The world's military leaders were initially skeptical of the technology being developed, but the progress was undeniable. Humanity was learning faster than anyone could have imagined. Hayes and her team made an astounding discovery. The rare element they had found within the wreckage of a downed Srthi ship had the potential to disrupt the invaders' energy shields and weapons systems. With enough refinement, they could create a weapon powerful enough to level the playing field. It was a moment of hope, but it came with a cost. The element was incredibly rare and would require months of refinement, something the humans did not have much of, as they had to act before the Srthi made their first move in full force. But even as the scientists pushed forward with their research, humanity's military commanders weren't sitting idle. They began implementing unconventional strategies, not relying solely on new technologies, but on the human ability to adapt under pressure. Generals worked alongside local militias, guerrilla groups, and hackers across the globe to create diversion tactics and communication networks that could be used to outsmart the Srthi. The first major act of defiance came when a group of engineers managed to create a prototype of a new form of weapon, a projectile that could pierce the alien shields. In a test, the new weapon hit a target from 3 kilometers away. It was an unassuming moment, but one that would change everything. The Srthi had come to Earth expecting a quick surrender, but now they were facing a species that refused to bow. They were facing humanity, a species with no master and no fear. The battle for Earth had begun, and humanity was no longer playing defense. They were playing for victory. The day the Srthi finally launched their full-scale attack on Earth was the day humanity realized just how far they had come in their preparation. The alien fleet unleashed a barrage of energy blasts at Earth's major cities, burning entire metropolises. In an instant, as Earth's defenders scrambled to retaliate, Earth's military was caught off guard by the ferocity of the initial strike. But they had something the Srthi didn't expect: an unwavering resolve, and the confidence that they were not fighting this war alone. What began as a series of desperate counterattacks soon turned into a brilliant series of tactical maneuvers driven by human ingenuity. On the ground, human forces had fortified their positions across the world using old and new technologies adapted from the alien ships they'd salvaged. The Srthi believed that Earth's primitive military would be powerless against their advanced weapons, but they had underestimated the will of the human spirit. The new weapons developed by Sarah Hayes and her team were ready to be deployed just in time. They had designed a prototype energy disruptor that could short-circuit the Srthi's shields and render their weapons useless. As the first blast hit a Srthi battleship, the shockwave rippled through the air, and the ship exploded in a fiery burst. The sight was one of pure awe, but also disbelief. No one had thought such a thing was possible, yet here it was, a direct hit against the alien invaders, and it worked. The news spread like wildfire. Humanity had struck a blow against the Srthi. They were not helpless after all. They were not weak. As the Srthi tried to regroup and retaliate, human forces began to strike harder and faster, their tactics evolving with every new encounter. The first major victory came when Jason Trent and his squadron of fighter pilots led a daring assault on a Srthi warship hanging above the Atlantic Ocean. Using the new disruptor weaponized by Earth's engineers, they launched precision strikes on the ship's engines and weapon systems. Watching as it began to drift slowly into space with massive gaping holes in its hull, the Srthi had never faced such precision from any species they had ever encountered. They couldn't understand how humans had learned so quickly, how they had adapted so fast. The Srthi's commander Jaruk watched from his flagship as his forces began to lose ground. His pride faltered for the first time in centuries. His people had never faced a threat like this before, and now they were at risk of losing this battle to a species they had considered insignificant. With every passing day, the Srthi suffered greater losses, their warships limping through space with broken engines, while Earth's forces continued to press forward. And then came the turning point when Hayes unveiled a new weapon, a massive pulse cannon capable of disintegrating entire Srthi cruisers. The weapon was deployed on Earth's largest battleship, a vessel previously thought to be too small to be effective against the Srthi fleet. But now it became a harbinger of destruction. As it tore through the alien ships, one by one, the Srthi had made a grave mistake. They thought they were invincible. They thought their strength would crush humanity without question. But what they hadn't accounted for was the human ability to learn, to innovate, and to never give up. The first wave of the Krathi began to retreat as their fleet was devastated in battle. Humanity had struck back harder than anyone could have imagined. The Krathi had never imagined the conflict would escalate in this way, and their initial confidence turned to frustration as the tide of battle began to shift. For the first time, they were forced to consider that Earth was not just a planet of primitive beings. The humans had proven themselves not only capable of fighting back, but also able to outthink their enemies. It was this realization that truly unsettled the Krathi, particularly their commander, Zurich, who had prided himself on his tactical genius and his empire's overwhelming power. Now, faced with the relentless adaptability of humanity, he began to question everything he knew about warfare. The humans weren't simply reacting to the Krathi's attacks. They were anticipating them. Every move the Krathi made seemed to have already been calculated and countered. The guerrilla tactics Earth's forces employed, strikes in unexpected places, misinformation campaigns, and well-timed ambushes, were beginning to wear down even the most seasoned Krathi officers. The aliens, masters of brute force, had never been forced to fight a war of attrition before. It was in these tense moments that Dr. Sarah Hayes proved to be a crucial asset to the human effort. Her work deciphering the Krathi language had reached a pivotal moment. What had begun as a vague understanding of alien symbols and transmission patterns had now evolved into a full-fledged translation system. It wasn't just a means of understanding the enemy's communications, it was a means of predicting their next moves. In a high-stakes meeting with the Joint Human Military Council, Dr. Hayes presented her findings. "We're no longer guessing," she said. "We can read their strategies before they even execute them. We have the upper hand." The room fell silent. With this newfound ability, the human military could track the Krathi's fleet movements in real time, responding to attacks before they were even launched. It was a stunning revelation, and it turned the war into a battle of wits. As the Krathi tried to adapt, Zurich ordered a shift in tactics, one that he had used in countless previous conquests. The Krathi would abandon their direct assaults and attempt a series of false retreats, luring the humans into traps. But what Zurich failed to account for was the level of human coordination now in place. The Earth forces, led by Lieutenant Jason Trent and other commanders who had gained experience through this conflict, began employing the same strategy of misdirection. They used decoy fleets, fake transmissions, and feints to confuse the Krathi, trapping them in ambush after ambush. Zurich's frustration grew, and as he watched his ships fall one by one, he grew more desperate. He sent in his elite forces, the Krathi's most formidable soldiers, to engage directly with Earth's ground forces. These warriors were enhanced by cybernetic implants and bioengineering that made them nearly unbeatable in combat. But again, humanity had already anticipated this move. Humans, not bound by the alien enhancements, relied on their intelligence and the environment itself to fight back. Lieutenant Trent led his squadron into urban warfare, using the city's structures to outmaneuver and outsmart the enemy. His pilots employed hit-and-run tactics, and Earth's forces fought with the determination of people who had nothing left to lose. In the skies, as Krathi warships loomed overhead, Earth's resistance fighters learned to use their terrain to their advantage. The stealth technology humans had developed with Dr. Hayes' breakthrough allowed them to strike without warning, retreating into the clouds before the Krathi could respond. The humans had turned the fight into a psychological battle, and it was Zurich who found himself on the back foot. The Krathi, masters of overwhelming force, had never had to deal with a foe so capable of turning their own tactics against them. As the weeks passed, Zurich began to fear that the very foundation of the Krathi Empire, its superiority in battle, was beginning to crumble. Earth's resistance was not just a fleeting spark of rebellion. It was a new way of waging war. The human ability to adapt, think ahead, and defy expectations was proving to be a far greater weapon than anyone could have anticipated. The war between Earth and the Krathi had stretched on for months, and while the alien empire still controlled vast sections of space, The tide was undeniably shifting. The unexpected victories and the resilience of humanity had begun to chip away at the invaders' confidence, and what had started as a desperate defense of Earth was now becoming a rallying cry for all of humanity. Earth was no longer fighting just for survival. They were fighting to win. Dr. Sarah Hayes, who had been at the heart of humanity's technological and strategic renaissance, made another breakthrough that would change the course of the war. After months of intense research, she and her team had perfected the superweapon they had dreamed of, a weapon capable of harnessing the rare element they had discovered early in the conflict. This new energy source could generate a pulse powerful enough to disable entire Krathi fleets, rendering their ships defenseless. With the military's help, they were preparing to launch this weapon from Earth's largest battleship, Endeavour, which had recently been converted into the spearhead of humanity's offense. The humans knew they needed to act quickly. The Krathi, though beginning to suffer from a series of devastating losses, were regrouping. Their forces were not easily crushed, and they had begun to adapt to Earth's new tactics. But the humans had one advantage they could no longer afford to ignore. The element they had harnessed was a game changer. If deployed effectively, it could not only neutralize the Krathi's advanced shields, but also cripple their ability to fight back. Lieutenant Jason Trent, the fearless pilot who had become a symbol of human ingenuity and courage, was chosen to lead a dangerous mission to clear the way for the Endeavour's final strike. His squadron had grown into one of the most skilled in Earth's military, and their reputation for using unconventional tactics to outmaneuver the Krathi had earned them a nickname, the Phantom Squadron. They would lead a two-pronged attack, a diversion in space to draw Krathi attention away from Earth's major cities and allow the Endeavour to position itself for the final strike. The night before the mission, Trent stood in the hangar, staring up at his fighter, his thoughts heavy with the weight of what was to come. The mission was risky, far riskier than anything they had attempted so far. There was a very real possibility that they wouldn't make it back. But humanity's survival was now on the line, and they all knew the importance of what they were about to do. "Are we ready?" Dr. Hayes asked as she approached Trent, her voice steady, but tinged with an undeniable urgency. "More than ready," Trent replied, his voice unwavering. "This is our moment." The next day, the skies lit up with the roar of jet engines as Trent and his squadron launched into space. The diversion worked perfectly, with their fighters drawing the Krathi into a dogfight that played out across the stars. As they engaged the alien forces in a fast-paced, high-stakes battle, the Endeavour moved into position behind the enemy lines, unseen and undetected. Back on Earth, every eye was glued to the screens. The final weapon was ready to fire. The Endeavour's pulse cannon hummed to life, and with a flash that lit up the heavens, it released a powerful wave of energy that surged toward the enemy fleet. The Krathi, caught off guard and unable to react in time, watched in horror as their ships began to fall from the sky. The pulse shot through their advanced shields and struck their warships directly, sending them into a spiral of destruction. One by one, the Krathi fleet began to crumble. On the ground, the world erupted in a collective cheer. Earth had delivered a blow that no one could have predicted. For the first time in months, hope surged through humanity's veins. The impossible was becoming possible. But the war was far from over. The Krathi were not the type to surrender easily, and though they were reeling from their losses, they would not simply retreat. The question now wasn't whether humanity could win. It was whether they could finish what they had started. The victory had been resounding, but it was only the beginning of the battle. The Krathi, though temporarily stunned by the destruction of their fleet, were not a species easily deterred. They had underestimated humanity's ingenuity once, but they would not make the same mistake again. Zarok, their commander, retreated to his flagship, seething with rage and determination. He would not let the humiliation of this defeat stand. He had watched his forces crumble under the pressure of Earth's new weapon, but he had also learned from it. Now, the Krathi would adapt. Humanity's leaders had hoped that the tide had truly turned in their favor, but they were keenly aware of how dangerous the Xtrathi could be when cornered. Dr. Sarah Hayes, working alongside Earth's top strategists, advised caution. "We've struck them hard, but this isn't over," she said. "The Xtrathi will regroup. They will fight smarter. We need to be ready for the next phase." Lieutenant Jason Trent, who had led the Phantom Squadron in the diversion, knew better than most just how fierce the Xtrathi could be. He wasn't one to celebrate victories too soon. His squadron had done its part, but the war was far from over. He had seen the fear in his crew's eyes when the Xtrathi retaliated. They were a force to be reckoned with, and the next confrontation could be their final one. It wasn't long before the Xtrathi launched their counterattack. Sherrick had pulled together the remnants of his fleet, and with surprising speed, reinforced it with new ships and technologies. He had learned from Earth's tactics and developed a strategy to turn the human advantage back into a disadvantage. The Xtrathi had access to a vast network of satellites that had been hidden in the far reaches of the solar system, and now they would use them to cloak their movements. In a daring and unprecedented move, the Xtrathi unleashed a devastating surprise attack against Earth's major military outposts. The pulse cannon from the Endeavour had dealt a significant blow to their fleet, but the Xtrathi's counterattack was swift and brutal. They used cloaked ships and precision strikes to hit key military installations across the globe, devastating Earth's defenses in one fell swoop. Human forces, still reeling from the initial shock, were thrown into disarray as the invaders hit them from all angles. The world, once filled with renewed hope, now found itself on the edge of panic. Cities fell into chaos as alarms rang out, and for the first time since the invasion had begun, humanity found itself on the defensive. But amidst the fear and confusion, something remarkable happened. People didn't give up. Across the globe, civilians took up arms, fighting alongside the military. Local militias formed, using every scrap of technology they could find to wage war against the Xtrathi. The human spirit, though battered, was not broken. In the skies, Trent and his squadron fought valiantly to protect Earth's remaining fleets. They darted between explosions and fire, weaving through the wreckage of ships that had been torn apart by the Xtrathi's attack. They knew the stakes were higher than ever now. Each mission was more dangerous than the last, but the spirit of the Phantom Squadron remained unshaken. As Earth's military and resistance forces began to reorganize, Dr. Hayes once again found herself at the heart of a new effort. The enemy was learning from every encounter, and she knew they would soon deploy something far more advanced than what they had faced so far. She pored over new intelligence reports, looking for any sign of weakness, any opportunity for a counterattack. "We need to strike first," she said firmly. "We cannot wait for them to gain the upper hand again. If we let them regroup for too long, we risk losing everything." Her words resonated with the leaders of Earth's forces. The time had come to make the Xtrathi pay for their arrogance. Humanity had come too far to give up now. The next stage of the war was about to begin, and the stakes were higher than ever. But even in the darkest hour, humanity was proving that it would fight for its survival, no matter the odds. The air was thick with tension as Earth's remaining forces scrambled to regroup in the wake of the Xtrathi counterattack. The cities that had once been beacons of human pride now lay in ruin, scorched by the alien invaders' relentless assault. The pulse cannon, which had delivered such a devastating blow to the Xtrathi fleet, was now little more than a memory, a brief glimmer of hope in a growing sea of darkness. Earth had lost much, but the fight was far from over. Dr. Sarah Hayes stood in the heart of the Earth Command Center, her mind racing with new plans. She knew that the Xtrathi had dealt humanity a critical blow, but they had underestimated the determination that coursed through the veins of every person left standing. Humanity's response had been swift, unyielding, and fierce. It was a war not just for survival, but for the soul of the species. As long as even one human remained, Earth would not surrender. "We can't just sit here and wait for them to finish us off," Dr. Hayes said, addressing the council of military leaders and strategists before her. We need to take the fight back to them. We have one shot, just one, to push them back. If we don't act now, they'll finish what they started." The council was silent, exhausted from the brutal losses, but Dr. Hayes' words carried weight. There was a fire in her eyes that stirred something in the hearts of the men and women around her. They had already lost so much, but they still had their will, and that was something the Xrathi could never take away. After a tense pause, General Corbin, the leader of Earth's remaining fleet forces, nodded in agreement. "Sarah's right," he said, his voice steady but worn. "We may be down, but we're not out. We have one last chance to take them by surprise. It's now or never." And so, the humans began their final preparations, working together in a coordinated, desperate effort to assemble a force strong enough to strike back. Dr. Hayes, who had been instrumental in reverse engineering alien technology, now led the development of a new weapon, a bomb made from the rare element the humans had discovered, designed to incapacitate Xrathi ships in a single devastating blow. This weapon, if it worked, could turn the tide of the war and bring humanity one step closer to victory. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Jason Trent and his Phantom Squadron once again took to the skies, knowing that their mission would be far more dangerous than any they had undertaken before. The Xrathi had learned from their previous mistakes and were no longer relying solely on brute force. They had developed new defensive technologies, including adaptive shields and weapons that could strike down any human fighter with brutal efficiency. But Trent and his squadron had learned as well. Their tactics, honed through countless engagements, were now more refined, more unpredictable. This time, they would hit the Xrathi where it hurt most, their heart. As the final plan took shape, Earth's forces made their move. The Endeavor, now armed with the new bomb, prepared to break through the Xrathi's defensive perimeter. At the same time, the Phantom Squadron would create a diversion, drawing the Xrathi's remaining fleet into a dogfight that would keep their attention focused on the skies. The hope was simple: distract, confuse, and then strike with everything humanity had left. The first wave of fighters launched into space, including Trent's squadron, each pilot knowing that this could be their final mission. The enemy ships loomed large in the distance, and for a moment, Trent felt a familiar rush of adrenaline, a sense that, despite everything, they had a chance. The Phantom Squadron broke through the Xrathi defenses with skill and precision, engaging the alien fleet in a chaotic battle. All around him, explosions rocked the sky as laser fire streaked past. Inside the Endeavor, Dr. Hayes watched the unfolding battle on the command screen, her heart in her throat. This was it, the moment they had been working toward. Earth's survival depended on the success of this mission. As the countdown clock ticked closer to zero, she silently willed the ship to breach the Xrathi's outer defenses and make its way to the enemy flagship. The stakes had never been higher. The war that had begun with a surprise invasion now stood at a precipice, and the fate of Earth hung in the balance. Would the humans' final, desperate gambit succeed, or would the Xrathi snuff out the last hope for survival? The Endeavor surged through the space battlefield, its engines roaring as it plowed through a barrage of enemy fire. Dr. Sarah Hayes stood at the command center, her eyes fixed on the screen, her heart pounding in her chest. The final weapon was in place, and humanity's last hope was now in motion. She knew this was the moment of truth, the moment that would either seal their victory or doom them all. Outside, the Phantom Squadron engaged in a ferocious dogfight, their fighters weaving in and out of the Xrathi fleet, dodging energy blasts, and striking their enemies with precision. Lieutenant Jason Trent's voice crackled over the comms as he led his squadron into the heart of the battle, his tone steady despite the chaos unfolding around him. "This is it, everyone," Trent's voice echoed, his words carrying both determination and resolve. "We hit them hard. We hit them fast. Stay sharp and don't let them break through." Trent's squadron swarmed around the Xrathi ships, taking evasive action and launching rapid-fire missiles at weak points in the alien fleet. The Xrathi responded with overwhelming firepower, their ships forming tight defensive formations, trying to repel the relentless human attack. It was clear that the Xrathi had learned from their past mistakes, but it was equally clear that they couldn't keep up with the agility and unpredictability of Earth's fighters. While the battle raged outside, the Endeavour moved silently closer to the enemy flagship. The ship's stealth systems, enhanced by the research of Dr. Hayes' team, ensured that the final weapon remained undetected, giving the crew a slim chance to make it to the heart of the Xrathi command. The closer they got to the enemy vessel, the more intense the fire became, but the crew remained steadfast. They knew they couldn't afford to fail. As the Endeavour approached the flagship's defensive perimeter, the countdown clock began to tick down, just minutes remaining. The Xrathi, realizing the danger, began to scramble their defenses, launching every weapon at the approaching human ship. Yet, as they fired, a new strategy unfolded. The Phantom Squadron executed a series of complex maneuvers, coordinating a series of feints that drew the Xrathi's attention away from the Endeavour, giving it a brief window to make its move. With seconds to spare, the Endeavour breached the final barrier, the powerful energy shield of the Xrathi flagship, and Dr. Hayes' team activated the weapon. The rare element inside the bomb flared to life, releasing a pulse of energy so powerful it shook the surrounding space. The bomb detonated within seconds, sending a shockwave through the heart of the Xrathi flagship. The alien vessel trembled, and then, with a deafening roar, it erupted into a mass of flame and metal, disintegrating under the force of the explosion. On the battlefield, the shockwave reverberated through space, sending ripples of destruction through the remaining Xrathi ships. The powerful pulse disabled their energy shields, leaving them vulnerable. The Phantom Squadron wasted no time, charging in with renewed vigor. Each strike, each missile, each laser blast found its mark. The remaining Xrathi warships faltered as their once mighty defenses crumbled, and they began to retreat. It was not a retreat of surrender, but of survival. The Xrathi had lost their flagship, their command center, and their advantage. With Earth's final blow struck, their forces began to crumble. It was the beginning of the end for the Xrathi invasion. Back on Earth, the human population watched in awe and disbelief as the Xrathi fleet began to disband. The war, which had once seemed impossible to win, was now shifting in their favor. As the last of the enemy ships fled into the stars, a cheer erupted across the globe. Humanity had done the unthinkable. They had fought back against an empire that believed itself invincible. Dr. Sarah Hayes let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding, her eyes glistening with unused tears. She turned to General Corbin, who stood beside her, and spoke softly. "We did it. We actually did it." He nodded, a proud smile breaking through the exhaustion. "We did, Sarah. Humanity's strength, our ability to adapt, to fight, and to never give up, has won the day." Lieutenant Trent's voice echoed over the comms once more. "This isn't just a victory for us. This is a victory for every human being on Earth. We've shown them who we are." The war was over, but the journey had only just begun. Humanity had taken its place in the cosmos, not as a species to be overlooked, but as one to be reckoned with. They had faced the unimaginable and come out victorious. The children of Earth had proven that their greatest strength was not in their weapons, but in their will to fight, to adapt, and to survive. And now, they stood on the threshold of a new era, one where the stars were no longer a distant dream, but a frontier to be explored. The eternal law had been rewritten.